Steve Miller Band.
Look out! The gangster's back. I'm gonna trade in my old horse for a brand new Cadillac. I'm gonna play some blues, 'cause I know you like that. Gonna get real loose and do the jump back jack. When I walk into a bar, girls mirror and fire say I'm a gangster. Listen while I play for you, crazy little thing called guitar blues.
Hello, this is Dan McClosky. Welcome to part 2 of an interview with guitarist, songwriter, singer, and hitmaker Steve Miller. Playing in the background is his song The Gangster Is Back. Before Steve was creating the huge #1 hits in the early 70s and selling millions of records, he was playing the blues. He spent his early youth in Wisconsin, and then he moved with his family at a young age to Texas. The interview begins with a discussion of his introduction to blues great T-Bone Walker. We'll start with a brief selection of T-Bone playing Mean Old World. So there you are in Texas, and you were lucky enough to learn some stuff from T-Bone.
Yeah.
Because you were older by that time, right?
Yeah, I was 9 when I met T-Bone.
And how did your dad connect up with T-Bone?
Well, T-Bone lived in Dallas, and of course my dad knew who T-Bone was and loved his music, but T-Bone had an ulcer, and he was at the hospital. He had a bad gut.
It was about 1952, right?
Yeah, 51. And he was back in Dallas, and he was at the hospital, and my dad found out he was there through a doctor who was treating him, and went and introduced himself and invited him over for dinner. And, T-Bone was just the most elegant, delightful, nicest guy ever. And he played at our house a lot, and he played parties. And the first time I met T-Bone, my parents rented a piano, and we had never had a piano. And I was not going to go to school. I got sick and stayed home. I don't feel good. I don't want to go to school. And the piano was there. And then I fiddled around with the piano all day long. I was just fascinated by it. And about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, this flesh-colored Cadillac convertible pulls into our driveway in the middle of a suburb of 3,000 houses that all look exactly the same. Everybody's got the same backyard. Pulls up. This guy in the most beautiful suit you ever saw, and a tie, gets out. He's got the big guitar case, and he walks in. It's T-Bone Walker. And I just, as soon as he opened up his guitar, I was just, on him just like that. And
Did you know his music at all at that time?
Well, I knew he was a great guitar player, and I had heard some of his recordings. I didn't know where he stood in the pantheon of blues players or anything. And my dad recorded all of this, so I have 2 hours of T-Bone playing live at our house that are better than all his records.
And he just
And
played
he's-
by himself. Did
No.
Did he
brought-
accompany himself like what did?
No, he
did
brought
your
a
dad
piano
have
player, and he brought a bass player, and he brought an electric guitar, and he played. And he taught me how to play the guitar behind my head and do the splits when I was 9 years
You were
old.
9.
Yeah,
He played his guitar like a dobro in the sense that it was flat.
flat. He
Around
played
his-
it flat like this.
Yeah, and so
And-
he had to get his
yeah.
hand around there.
T-Bone, his whole career is really strange. He started off as a banjo player. He used to be a dancer. He used to do a dance with a table in his teeth. He would pick up a table in his teeth and dance and do stuff for nickels and dimes and quarters.
Where did he grow up? In
He
Texas?
grew up in South Dallas. T-Bone's another one. Like, I was wondering, how did my parents turn out to be such hipsters from near Joplin, Missouri? How did that happen? And you look at T-Bone and you go, how did little barefoot black poor boy who grew up in South Dallas in this horribly segregated, separated society get so sophisticated and look so great and dress so beautifully and have such great stage presence and become such a sophisticated worldwide bridge between the funky country blues, the Delta, Texas, Mississippi, Trinity River, blues to jazz. And it's just
like
one
a
of those
city,
things.
like a city jazz blues.
Yeah. And you listen to his first records and he, sounds like he's from the Delta.
That dirty Trinity River sure have done me wrong. That dirty Trinity River sure have done me wrong. It came in my windows and doors, now all my things are gone. Trinity River blue keeps me bothered all the time. Trinity River blue keeps me bothered all the time. I lose all my clothes, baby, if I'm going to lose my mind.
T-Bone was a great singer too, not just a guitar player. He also played with Charlie Christian, right? I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, T-Bone and Charlie Christian were friends and kind of rivals. They would go to the fairs and they would play at the state fair, and T-Bone would go up to Tulsa, Oklahoma, I think, where Charlie was from, and Charlie would come down and they played some gigs together, and they knew each other in Texas and Oklahoma.
Probably like in the late 30s.
Yeah, and at the same time, the Texas Playboys, Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, and that guitar player was kind of getting jazzy, and they all knew each other. So you had this country and western swing jazz band. You had Charlie Christian, you had T-Bone Walker, percolating.
Wow.
And they were both early into the electric guitar.
Yeah. T-Bone never played a solid body guitar. He always played that pretty thick.
He had an arch top, yeah.
Yeah, it was like what, about 4 inches, 5 inches thick.
Big Gibson arch top. And he, when went to California to play with Benny Goodman, when John Hammond brought Charlie out to L.A., T-Bone had already gone to L.A., and he was working in L.A. There was a big club out there where he had a big following, and he went and got Charlie and took Charlie to the session. And then Charlie ended up getting, after the things he went through, where Benny didn't like his playing at all, and then they snuck him on the stage. John Hammond snuck him on the stage, and he knocked everybody out, and he got the job, and ended up playing in Carnegie Hall next week. And T-Bone was playing with Horace Heidt in Harlem, playing electric guitar, and they were all hanging out together at Minton's and wherever else they got together to play after those gigs.
What kind of guitar did Charlie Christian play, do you think?
It's an arch top. It's an arch top with a pickup.
Was it built in or something you added to the guitar?
I think it was built in. And I think it was one of the very, very first ones. You know, it's really great because when you listen to his recordings, his guitar sounds great. And, you know, he didn't have a great amp or anything, but he sure made it sound good.
Oh, incredible musician.
Yeah.
So there you are in Dallas and learning from people like T-Bone. And then I think you felt at one point you were ready to start playing. I think you were 12 years old.
My parents put me into a private boys' school in the 7th grade. The first day in class, there was a kid there who was a drummer, and we started talking. And I'd never met a drummer. I'd never met anybody else who could play guitar. You know, it was just me. T-Bone and Les. You know. It turned out, his name was Baron Cass, and it turned out that Baron had been taking drum lessons since he was 5 years old, and he was like Gene Krupa. He was an absolutely pro drummer, and he was 12 years old. And, you know, he's like Cubby and the Mouseketeers. He was a complete grown man on the drums, could play beautiful shuffle, could do anything. I played guitar, he played drums, so I would start going over to his house, he'd come over to my house. And Baron's dad was the greatest guy in the world. He loved music and he let us play all we want, make as much noise as we want. My father would make us go down to the barn and turn that down, you know. And so I was always over at Baron's house. A couple of weeks of that went by and a new kid showed up and he was sitting there looking at his fingers and I said, "Do you play guitar?" And he goes, "Yeah." And his name was Bob Hayden, and he was a really good guitarist and a great banjo player, and in love with Ricky Nelson and James Burton. And we started watching that Ozzie and Harriet show, and every week the show would come on, and Ozzie was a band leader, and Harriet had been a singer, and it just seemed real good to me, you know. And then at the end, there would be a high school dance, and Ricky and his guys would, you know, they always make it sound like, "Why don't you go play?" And he would go play a number at the end of the show with James Burton on guitar. And we were just, who is James Burton? Man, oh man, oh man. Watched that and we went, we could do that. So Baron and I mimeographed a letter saying we had a rock and roll band. It was called the Marksman Combo. We went to St. Mark's, and that we were available and that we were taking bookings. We didn't say how old we were or anything, but we said we were only going to take bookings for the next 3 weeks, and then after that we'd be booked up. We wouldn't be able to take any more for the semester. And Baron and I got the band booked for the whole semester, every Friday and Saturday night, at $125 a night, and there were 3 of us. And what we did was we would show up and play the intermission. They'd always have a dance band. Everybody was bored to death with dance bands, and everybody was doing the foxtrot, and nobody wanted to do any of that stuff. It's 1956, and we would walk in, take one amp and the drums and set it up on the stage and play 15 minutes of rock and roll instrumentals for $125 and leave. And the crowd would just go, and it would go nuts. So I went, I got to start singing something. So I started practicing, and I said, I got to play the harmonica. Started doing that. Oh, we need a bass player, and I would say to my mom, I mean, like I was 12 years old, I had to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. I was doing phone business from 8 to 9, you know, and I was talking to fraternity boys, and nobody knew how old we were, and there were no rock bands available. You couldn't hire a rock band. You couldn't, and we were it. We started playing all these drunk fraternity parties and stuff, and I would explain to my mother, you don't understand, I have a gig. I got to be there at 7 o'clock. And so I taught my older brother, who was 3 years older than me and had just gotten his driver's license, how to play bass so he could drive us to the gigs. And that band played every Friday, Saturday night in Dallas, Texas until through the 12th grade.
Wow.
And people still know who it was. And Boz became a background singer.
Boz Scaggs.
Yeah. And I had 2 guys that sang, Boz and Roger Golding. Roger sang bass. So we had 4 vocalists. We really could sing really well. And we were a really good band, and we entertained the hell out of people.
What kind of music were you playing?
We played blues. We played Bobby Blue Glenn, Ray Charles. We played all Jimmy Reed. Everything Jimmy Reed ever wrote, we played.
No, I love you, babe. No, I love you, babe. No, I love you, babe. But you don't even know my name. Let me tell you, baby. I'll tell you what I would do. I would rob, steal, kill somebody just to get back home to you.
We also did stuff like, like the Ventures and stuff like that, and Dwayne Eddy. And we were doing the Gangster Love, Johnny Guitar Watson, and we were all rhythm and blues.
Jesse James and Frank James, Billy Kid, all the rest. Supposed to be some bad cats out there in the West. But when they dug me and my gangster ways, they hung up their guns and made it to the grave, 'cause I'm a gangster of love. Say I'm a gangster of love. Well now, when I walk down the street, all the girls that I meet say he's a gangster of love. Yeah.
And that's what you had to play. Nobody wanted to hear pop tunes. They wanted, they wanted R&B. That's what we played.
Now, was Boz playing an instrument, or were you just singing along?
No, Boz was just singing. And Boz didn't start playing guitar until 1961. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and I left the band, and they kept the band going. Some other guys took my place, and I was gone. They had a good deal going. They didn't want to, not keep the band going. So they kept it going. I went up and started a new band at the University of Wisconsin, which had never had a rock and roll band. It was 1961. It's like 4 years later. And I was the first real rock band there. And I called up Boz. And I went home at Christmas vacation, my freshman year, and got together with Boz and gave him a bunch of real quick guitar lessons. And in 6 days, he was playing everything. He just picked it right up. And then he came up that summer after he graduated from high school, and then he went to the University of Wisconsin, and we formed our band there for a while.
So what was it called, the Ardells?
It was called the Ardells in the school year, and then during the summer, we were the Fabulous Night Train. And we played bars in resorts across the state and in Illinois, and mafia joints and stuff. The summer gigs for us were like the beginning of becoming a lounge act in Las Vegas and Tahoe. That's where the circuit was going to end up. We thought that was really funny, and we used to do a lot of Louis Prima tunes. And every time it rains, doo-wah, pennies from heaven, shooby-dooby.
You'll find your fortune falling all over town. Be sure that your umbrella is upside down, and trading for a package of...
And in the school year, we were the Ardells, and we played fraternity parties. And that was how we made our living. Sometimes we'd play Saturday morning before a football game, Saturday after a football game, Saturday night at the party after the football game. We'd play a beer supper on Friday at 5 o'clock, and then we would play a fraternity party at 9 o'clock at night. So we were playing about 5 gigs a weekend. We just worked all the time, everywhere, all over the campus. It was a fun band. When Boz left, I taught a friend of mine how to play bass in a couple of days. So he played bass in the band. Ben Sidran came in and played keyboards in that band. Hart McNee was a great tenor player and a flute player. Through the whole thing, we had this guy named Ronnie Boyer, who I had met my very first week I was in college in Madison. He was the best shuffle drummer I think I ever worked with. He just could lay down a shuffle that was just seamless, it was unbelievable. And he played through all of those bands. So we were really lucky that we always had a much better drummer than any of the other college bands had. They all had Norky drummers, who weren't really real drummers, and for all my life, from the time I started the Marksmen, Baron Cass, our original drummer, had taken drum lessons since he was 5. He was 12 years old, and he played like Gene Krupa or somebody. He was a stone cold professional drummer at the age of 12.
I had a question about people that you heard when you were in Texas before you went to the University of Wisconsin. I heard that you saw Chuck Berry at the Sportatorium.
Yeah, the Sportatorium was where they had the Big D Jamboree, they had the wrestling matches, and they had the rock shows and the rhythm and blues shows. So I saw Chuck Berry, I saw Al Hibbler, I saw Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, I saw Carl Perkins, Clyde McPhatter, Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, Ernest Tubb, Hank Snow. I heard Hank Williams. I didn't see him in person, but they were on the radio, and I listened to the Big D Jamboree as well. So growing up in Texas was amazing because we had this all-country kind of segment of the media, and we had this all-black, because everything was segregated. So it was a black radio station for black people. It wasn't, a general population, diverse kind of deal. So you got this pure black world on the radio, and you got this pure country thing on the radio and on television. And you had Freddie King playing Saturday afternoon TV show. Every Saturday afternoon, it's Freddie King.
Well, friendly swingers, let's welcome to the beat Mr. Freddie King. Frederick, if you will, please.
We watched and we listened to all of that. So all of this stuff was going on, and we were hearing all of it in Texas, and I was listening to Bobby Blue Bland and Ray Sharp, B.B. King, Lightning Hopkins, T-Bone Walker, Jimmy Reed, Bo Diddley, Little Walter, the Neville Brothers, all the stuff from New Orleans, Huey Piano Smith. And then I was listening to Miles Davis and Coltrane and Howard Roberts and Ahmad Jamal and Cannonball Adderley, of course, modern jazz quartet, Segovia. Listened to a lot of Segovia.
Where were you listening to this, at home? This is your dad's record?
I was listening to the jazz part of it at home. Then we had a jazz radio station. And then the blues part of it, we had the black radio station, KNOK. And we also had a blues program that was on every night from 8 o'clock to midnight. There was a guy there named Jim Lowe who did this unbelievably cool blues show. Then there was John R. from Nashville and his show.
John R. went on Southern Dixie. On record, of course, WLAC when the action is 1510 on the dial at 50,000 watts of joy. Nashville, Tennessee.
We were listening to everything. The only thing we didn't really listen to or know about was pretty much the West Coast R&B. I didn't realize T-Bone was recording a lot in California and that, what was happening out there until later,
But live, other than on TV, you couldn't go to any clubs in those days.
Oh, yeah. We backed up Jimmy Reed when we were 14. We backed him up. The Marksman Combo was hired to play behind Jimmy Reed at Luann's in Dallas, which was a party by the patio kind of outdoor club, indoor bar, tavern, nightclub, big patio, big tent. And in Texas, because of the religious laws, you couldn't buy a mixed drink, but you could bring your own bottle. So basically everybody had a fifth of bourbon and a loaded 45 in their glove box. And that's what it was like growing up in Texas. And I mean everybody. And when you went to clubs, people had their own bottles and were buying glasses of ice, pouring their drinks. So I think Fort Worth and Houston had the highest murder rates in the country for years. And it was rough. And there was a lot of music everywhere. The music scene in the South was much better than it was anywhere else.
How did you learn to play harmonica? Did you just teach yourself that?
Yeah, in Texas, there was a lot of harmonica business going on. Jimmy Reed played harmonica. Those were pop hit records on Top 40. Even in high school, like kids in our high school had parties where they paid me to play. And we worked everywhere. We played all over the place and did the same thing when we got to college. And then at the end of college, I had to decide whether I was going to continue in comparative literature and become a teacher and write a really great book and wear a tweed coat and smoke a pipe or get out of town. I decided to get out of town. I took a really hard look at academic life, and that's where I was headed. I started looking at guys who were like 30 years old arguing over the size of their desk, arguing about their parking spaces and stuff, and I just went, man. And so I did a lot of soul searching, and then after what should have been my last semester when I didn't graduate, I was short of enough credits to graduate because of the time I'd spent going to the University of Copenhagen. They didn't credit me for those credits, and they said, well, you got to come back and go to summer school, and then you can get your degree. And I said, you know what? I'm out of here. I'm going to Chicago. So that's when I sold my books, packed everything up, and headed to Chicago in my Volkswagen bus.
What made you decide you wanted to go to Chicago?
I heard about Paul Butterfield. Some friends of mine said, man, there's this guy, because we were playing blues at the University of Wisconsin all the time. Boz and I, when we were in the night trains, we were advertised as, rock stars from Texas playing that shuffle beat or whatever it was, it was that kind of thing. So I went to Chicago, went into Big John's, which was on the near north side, and was this nightclub that had gotten quite a reputation on Wells Street, which was where Old Town was, which were all the folk music. You had guys like who ended up in the Birds up the street at the folk clubs, and then down the street was the blues club, and that's where Butterfield was. And I went in there and I saw his band, which was the greatest version of his band, which was Elvin Bishop and Sammy Lay and Jerome Arnold. There were just four of them. And it was the closest to probably seeing Little Walter that there ever would be.
Go no further, brother. Ain't no need to go no further, man. Well, you're packing 45. You had better stop that jive. Ain't no need to go no further, brother. Ain't no need to go no further, brother. Ain't no need to go no further, man. Well, you thought you were pretty slick, taking everybody's chick. Ain't no need to go no further, brother.
It was a really great band, and I saw it being young and cocky, I went, I've been doing that all my life, man. Maybe I could get a gig here. And I went back and forth to Chicago, back to Madison, and I finished up my school year, and I was hardly at school. Just kept going back to Chicago, and finally I just went, I gotta put a band together, and I started looking around for somebody to play with, and ran into Barry Goldberg. And Barry was just a brilliant little Hammond organ player. He didn't play the B3, he played the smaller one, which was even hipper, because we could carry that around. And he was really great on it, and we put a band together, and we started working in Chicago, and we worked our way into Big John's, where Butterfield played. And, I saw Butterfield, and then very early on, I saw Muddy and James Cotten and Howling Wolf, and that's when I really went, okay, these are adults. This isn't kids doing New Jersey punk rock or something. This is like, Muddy Waters, and this is incredible. And Otis Spann's playing piano, and it was unbelievable. And I was seeing them all the time and competing with them all the time for the same gigs. And there were about 5 clubs. There's one on the south side, one on the west side, a couple on the near north side, and one in the center of town. Howlin' Wolf would be at one, Muddy Waters would be at one, we'd be at one. And that was after Butterfield left town and got famous. When Butterfield left town, there was a vacuum, and Barry and I moved right in to fill that vacuum. And we just started working all those gigs.
And who was doing the singing there?
I was.
You were on Hullabaloo. The Goldberg Miller Band was on Hullabaloo, and it looked like he was singing the Mother's song.
That was the only song he sang. Like, I was running the band, I was singing everything, I was putting the sets together, I was getting Barry on the stage on time, I was running everything.
I said the only woman in this world you can't trust is your mother.
He had a manager, and it was all about Barry, so it came time to do the television show. All of a sudden, it's the Mother song, Barry singing it, and I left the band shortly after. I said, okay, I'm gone, I'm out of here.
Did you know Barry in Wisconsin, or you just met him in Chicago?
In Chicago, and I love Barry, man. Barry was like, he and I, when we did Hullabaloo, we were hanging out with the Four Tops. And the Supremes were on the show, but the Four Tops were around for rehearsal. They used to make you rehearse the show like for a week, and then you'd shoot it. And so we were hanging out with the Four Tops, and Barry was writing with those guys. And Barry was a really great person to work with, to write with, to make records with. He is a natural talent, really great. Barry's the kind of guy, like, I could play like a da-da-do-da-da-da-da-do-da-da, and he'd come up with the chorus in 20 seconds. And you go, yeah, that's perfect. That's the way we worked just like that. Really, his manager was just a terrible person, and I baited him into firing me in public on the stage at Big John's. It's like, oh yeah, really? Oh yeah? Oh yeah? And just, you're fired. Thank you. And then I went to California and signed a $500,000 recording contract, which he immediately tried to sue me for, right? And he showed up with his lawyer from L.A., and I had this really tough lawyer who negotiated my deal and who never cared if he ever worked in the music business again.
What did you call him, Lip Pliers?
Yeah, this is his nickname, Lip Pliers. Dick Hodge was his name. He became a district judge. But he was so good at it, so these guys came up and they're like suing me, and they're really being snotty. He's got this lawyer who's just being, horrible to us. So I called Dick and told him what happened, and so Dick got busy, and all of a sudden the case was moved from Los Angeles to in front of the labor board in San Francisco. So every time they wanted to give us a hard time, they had to fly to San Francisco and talk in front of the labor board. And at the end, I think they had to pay me $6,000 too. It was so great, because they were saying they had 50% of my contract and they owned my publishing, and they did, so I beat them on all of that stuff. But that was just why I had to not work with Barry, because that was the guy who represented Barry and the guy who said, oh, by the way, Barry's going to be singing this new song he wrote on Hullabaloo, not you, okay.
And that was the one that came out as a single, right?
Yeah, it was out as a single, and I think we had a Jimmy Reed tune on the flip side or something, I'm not sure.
Was there a record that ever came out, Goldberg Miller Blues Band?
It marched right up to the Empire State Building, jumped in the mail chute, and was last seen traveling at 6,000 miles an hour toward the center of the earth into darkness.
So when you went to Chicago, did you know anybody there?
Yes, I did. My cousin Carol, who's really like my sister. I was able to go there, and they had a little maid's room in the back of their apartment. So I was able to move in, and I had a place to like leave my toothbrush. That really made all the difference, yeah.
Going to Chicago was like another college degree, really, in a way.
Yeah, it was like a doctor's degree in blues or a master's degree in blues, you know. I mean, it was really great. I was there at a time when Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf really didn't have much of their career left, and they had not been discovered by the colleges. They had done that European tour in '64 or whenever it was, but nothing much had happened. They were making their living playing 6-7 nights a week in Chicago. So they were there all the time.
They call me Mighty Waters. You know I'm the adopted man of the deep blue sea. Call me Mighty Waters. You know I'm the adopted man of the deep blue sea. You know I've been like that ever since my baby boy been gone from me.
You could go see them any night you want. If you weren't working, you could go see Muddy or Howlin' Wolf. They worked from 9 at night till 4 in the morning, as we all did. We worked, 6 days a week from 9 at night till 4 a.m. It was really a great place to get your chops together, to really, pay your dues, be able to hear great adult music played at a nice low level, unbelievable performances. Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters were the real deal. Junior Wells and Buddy Guy didn't seem like the real deal. You had the feeling that they would drop the blues in a split second if they could get a hit. And that's what Junior did when he got his Fantasy Records deal and he got a bad James Brown copy album. He stopped being who he was. And it wasn't until they did Hoodoo Man Blues and that stuff that they got back on track and did one of the greatest all-time Chicago blues records ever made.
Ooh-wee. Ooh, ooh, ooh-wee. Ooh-wee, baby. Mm-hmm. Ooh, ooh-wee. I just need somebody got to help me. Oh Lord, to sing these blues. Look at here, baby. Come.
it was amazing to be there amongst that much talent.
Did you get to know the musicians pretty well, like Muddy and Otis Rush, people like that?
I got to know Otis pretty well. Otis was very, very friendly. And I got to know Howling Wolf. He was really, really friendly. Muddy wasn't that friendly. I got to be really good friends with James Cotten. I played rhythm guitar for Buddy Guy. I knew everybody to a certain degree. I wasn't like hanging out at their house and having dinner with them or sleeping in the couch, like Elvin Bishop was, but they were very open, and it was interesting because they were all like 15, 20 years older than me. It was interesting to play with them and work with them. I got to have relationships that went on through time really with James Cotten and Buddy Guy and Junior Wells. Those were the three guys that I really saw the most of. James was the guy that I really spent the most time with.
What were the clubs like? How would you describe them?
Well, they were places where people went to drink and get drunk. There were police corruption, mafia involvement, gangster activity going on in the back. People being beaten up in the alleys. And I mean, it was the Chicago mafia, and the police would come in their uniforms on Sunday night and collect their protection money. The mob would come in and get their money. I don't know how the nightclubs made any money, but people lined up to get into those clubs, and everybody drank a lot, and it was hard party and hard rock and blues clubs. They were real blues clubs,
Was there a mix of black and white people there?
Oh yeah, it was a very diverse crowd of people, which was unusual. And so it had a real bohemian underground feel to it. And there was a lot of intermingling of culture, music, literature, and style between blacks and whites for sure. And there were lots of people from all over the world. There were people like from Japan and from Paris and Russia, and people would come there, and they were beginning to come to Chicago and pass through, to see what was going on. And you had Chess Records, of course, and Delmar, Bob Kessner, I think is the guy. So he was there, and he was a very important kind of judge of the talent. And there were guys from the East Coast were coming through and signing people. Who was the guy who signed Butterfield? He produced a bunch of records, and he was around for a while. Electra was around, and Fantasy was around, and there was stuff going on. So it was like the first time in my life, really, I went, wow, maybe I could actually make a record. Whoa. And when I went to Chicago to play, I hadn't really thought, yeah, I'm going to Chicago, I'm going to make a record, man. That was like, making a record was like being Frankie Avalon and working for Dick Clark and being on the Ed Sullivan Show. That was not what I was interested in at all. I didn't really think about making records until Butterfield had his record, and then I went, wow, maybe I could make a record. And then we just kept hearing about what was going on in San Francisco. San Francisco, if you put your ear down on the rail, it was all going on in San Francisco. And Butter went out there. And the thing about that was you could leave Chicago, you could go to San Francisco, and on Friday night you could make as much money as you made in a week in Chicago because you were playing in a room that had 1,200 people, and it was the Family Dog. And Chad Helms was paying people fairly, you know. And you had Bill Graham, who was running the Fillmore, and they were in competition, and they ran 7 nights a week against each other, just like that for I don't know how many years it was like that. And I just went back and forth and back and forth. I liked Chad Helms a lot better than I liked Bill Graham. Bill Graham was always had some sort of swindle going on. You were always being cheated somehow. He was selling, you know, tickets out the back door, bringing people in, charging you $300 for the towel service. Just always had some sort of scam going on, and it never felt honest or right or anything. But we played there 120 times. And that was like not 120 nights. That was probably 360 nights because most of the gigs were 2 to 4 days long. And so we'd go in and we'd play, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday or something like that. It was great because Clifton Chenier would be playing Sunday evening, and Monday night would be Modern Jazz Quartet, and Tuesday might be Johnny Cash, and, you know, Wednesday would be the Jefferson Airplane, and Thursday, you know, the Grateful Dead, and Friday, Janis Joplin, and Saturday, Freddie King or something. And as we got into it, we started making it Freddie King and Lightning and Howlin' Wolf and bringing in all these other outside acts. So it wasn't just San Francisco folky, rocky blues bands, you know, like at first. We would go to Bill Graham and say, man, you got to get Howlin' Wolf out here, man. Here's who Howlin' Wolf, he didn't know who they were, you know. Get the Modern Jazz Quartet, man. You know, get these people out here. And just almost anybody they asked would come out and play because it was a good paying gig.
How long did you actually spend in Chicago?
I started really going like in 64. I was there 65, 66, about 2.5, almost 3 years.
Did you ever have any close calls in any of the clubs?
I had a few. I was an outspoken person, as you'd be surprised to hear, Danny. And while we were running around trying to make our name, Barry and I, when we first started, we got this gig from these mafia guys who opened up this little club right next door to Big John's. And we thought, well, that's great, man, you know, right next door. So we went and took the gig, and it was a real small little club, and they built a little bandstand. There was a payphone on the bandstand. We started playing, and, you know, we were right next to Big John's. People started coming in because we were a really good band, and they could see us and they could hear us right on the street. We started really doing business, and then all of a sudden the power was cut off. And the guy comes and gets on the bandstand of the payphone. He goes, I don't care, I want you to break them legs. You know, it was like issuing commands to beat people and stuff. And so I was watching all this stuff. We got out of there. They owed us about $350, something like that. We played there a week or something. And then we started working next door right away, Big John's. And every set I would go over, and the guy who ran this mafia club was kind of wimpy. He was kind of easy to push around. I go, hey man, you owe me $350, you know, and I'm representing my drummer and my bass player and Barry, and we did our work, and come on, man, And I kept going over there, and then my drummer came to me one day and he said, "Hey, man, we don't need that money." He said, "You need to just leave that alone now. Don't bring that up again." And then a couple of days later, we moved around the corner to another club. We got in trouble with the union. And so I went down to the union and was telling, the vice president of the Chicago Musicians Union, "You messed everything up. You guys are doing such a lousy job. You're not representing us at all. You're just a bunch of con men taking, I gave it all the trouble with you people." And, we went through all of that. And he told me, he said, "Steve, I think you should leave town. I think you ought to just get out of town." And this was like a day after my drummer had said, "Man, you don't need to keep bugging those guys for that money because they're going to kill you if you don't stop, And I left town. I packed it up and said, "Okay, I'm out of here." Boom. And I went home first. I went to Dallas, kind of got my bearings. And all this time I've had this Volkswagen bus. I mean, I've been driving it in high school. I've been driving it all through college. I've been driving it everywhere. It's got like 200,000 miles on it, and it's like the cheapest one. It has no insulation. It's like a beer can with, some vinyl seats, 2 seats up front, right? And it's empty. And a heater the size of a softball, And I'd been living in it, traveling in it, doing all this stuff. And I decided to enroll at the University of Texas and go to music school. Tried to enroll in music school, and they said, "Well, you can take some advanced composition courses." They interviewed me and did some stuff, and I played them some electronic music I had been working on a tape recorder. And they said, "You can take an advanced composition course, but you can't get a degree in music here." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Well, you can't read or write music." And I said, "Duh, that's why I'm here. Teach me to read and write. Come on. I want to do this." And they said, "Nah, mm-mm." So I hung out for like 3 weeks. Sold all my books, withdrew from the University of Texas, got queen-size mattress and built a bed frame in the back of my bus, put my basement guitar amp, my tape recorder, my guitar, and my sitar. And I drove out to the highway, and I looked east, and I looked west, and I flipped a coin, and the coin flip said I was supposed to go east, and I said, "Nah, screw it, I'm going west." And I turned left, and I drove to San Francisco. And I drove across to California, and I stopped at Esalen. I met Fritz Perls and hung out there for a week and went, "This isn't for me." And I had already taken LSD in 1963 at Madison, and I had this deep revelation. That was a big part of me deciding, I'm a musician. I'm not going to be a writer. I'm done with that. Anyway, I got through the Esalen thing, and that's when I arrived in San Francisco Sunday afternoon in time to catch Paul Butterfield playing at the Fillmore Auditorium, and Grace Slickby transferred as the new lead singer in the Jefferson Airplane, and Big Mama Thornton, I think, was on that show too. So, wow. And that was my first night in town, and I went up and I sat in with Butterfield and did Yonder's Wall and Fannie Mae and something else. I can't remember what I played with them, and announced I had a band and was coming to town. So that was it. That was the beginning of the San Francisco era. And not long after, probably about a year later, I met you at the Matrix.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have 4 7-inch reels of those sets.
I know. You were the guy with the tape recorder.
That's what I have today. The blues with a feeling. That's what I have today. And now I've got to find my baby. If it takes all night and day. What a lonesome old feeling when you're living by yourself. What a lonesome old feeling. Yes, when you're living by yourself. You can't get the one you're loving. You have to use somebody else.
I heard that when you were playing with Buddy Guy, you had to quit after about 3 weeks. Tell me a little bit about that, just briefly.
Well, I had to quit because Buddy had a rule that before each set, everybody in the band had to have one shot of bourbon. So let's see. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 7 shots of bourbon a night. And I couldn't do that. And I was looking at guys who were totally alcoholic, who were just sauced up to their ears all the time, and seeing them live their lives and play and realizing that what alcoholics they were, that they were just drinking all the time they were doing this. And I just said, buddy, you can't do this anymore. can't play rhythm guitar. I just couldn't do it. And also, the scene was really changing in Chicago. One of the most unusual things about it, Danny, was that it seemed like it would go on forever. It just seemed like it was Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and Junior Wells and Buddy Guy and James Cotten, and everybody was there, and it just was something. And all of a sudden, at the same time, they all went on the college circuit, and the whole Chicago scene disappeared overnight. And where a club would have like 600 people in it and be packed, 2 weeks later, after this all happened, when everybody left town, the whole scene just fell apart and there wasn't anybody there. I was playing with Buddy Guy to 20 people some nights, and it just wasn't happening. So, I just said, buddy, I got to get out of here, man. I'm gone.
Steve, it's been great talking with you.
You as always.
You've been listening to part 2 of an interview with Steve Miller, blues and rock guitarist, singer, songwriter, and major hit maker. This is Dan McClosky saying thanks for listening.